And I don't think that we gained any other ones. Let's see. What is up, everybody? What is up, party people? Oh, it's good to see y'all 1 week removed from all the madness, the 2 hour stream that we did, debating nothing but 3 lost teams and our own teams. But we are here. College football playoffs made their decision on the final 12 teams, and I'm okay with it for the most part. So that's kind of what we'll be discussing today, is looking at, again, how these college football playoffs kind of broke down and our opinions on it, and maybe some things that we would be recommending as fixes. But I kind of want to do a general check on y'all. Both of y'all had teams that lost and had implications that kind of played out into this overall pool. So Nathan, I'll check in with you first. How are you? Texas Longhorns fan, brutal loss to University of Georgia.
It was a tough loss. I think it's safe to say that Quinn Ewers is not what all the Longhorn fans expected to be this year. It's safe to say that I think all the Longhorn fans, I can speak for them, is what we're ready for the Manning era. I think next year this will be Manning's team. I think the offense will look a lot better with Manning back there. I don't know what Quinn's problem has been this year, but it was a tough loss. I really wanted to get the SEC championship first year in the conference, but first year in the conference, we still have already accomplished more than A&M has our first year, and so
Yep.
I'm gonna still take that as a win and ride that on my high horse. With the loss, looking at the bracket now, I think the loss kind of played in our favor there, if I'm being honest. So I was kind of mad, and then I saw the selections on Sunday, and I was like, well, I think the loss might have helped us. Yeah, tough loss. It was a sloppy football game, both from Georgia and Texas. It's kind of hard to win a championship game when you have 11 penalties for 94 yards and you missed a field goal. That last field goal that we hit to go into overtime could have been the game winner, but it was just a sloppy game, and that's just how football is sometimes. So
Yeah, it was unfortunately like, I mean, if Nathan, and you know this, and it's just the two teams that I think I rooted that I wanted to lose the most this year. Typically, it's typically Alabama, Georgia. It's the typical winners that we're constantly seeing time in and time out. But if I had to be honest, this year it was Texas and OU. You left the Big 12 tooting your horns. That's all I wanted to see was UT and OU fall and burn. UT didn't as much, so I will say that it was nice to see that. But gosh, it was picking lesser of the evils this weekend with Georgia, who I generally am like, I want you to lose every game from here on out. and they had to face Texas. So I didn't know who I wanted to pick. I wanted it to be a good game, and it didn't disappoint. Again, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Nathan. I think that, like you said, y'all almost got the better end of the stick. Sure, you don't get the banner your first season in the SEC. But hell, by the end of it, all you really care about is the natty. So
Yeah, well, before we move on, I do want to give a tip of the hat to a team that did join a new conference and won the title game. Shout out to Army.
hey,
Shout out to Army.
got it done. SMU is almost another one. They just joined it and just missed out, but we see them also in the conference or the college football playoffs here. So, Dalton, what about you though? I wanted to do a general check-in. I know that you're probably in kind of a down part of your days for
In
sure.
hiding. Unfortunately, I got to go to work. So,
Right.
and unfortunately, I work in Texas. So I work with a bunch of Texas fans. But no, first and foremost, congrats to Texas, but mostly to Georgia. Texas had a great season first year in the SEC. Like DJ said, I didn't want them to do well their first year in or Oklahoma, OU, and unfortunately, OU had a terrible season, and then they come around and they still beat Bama. So like I definitely wasn't the season I was looking for at all for Bama. However, I think with Texas, great season. However, just getting to that SEC championship, Georgia is the best team they've played all year, and they lost both times to them. So, I mean, we'll see how it fares and bodes well for them in the playoffs because they're going to see Georgia and better teams than they've seen all season. But I still think Texas has got one of the best defenses in college football. That said, but their offense is a little weary. So we'll see how that all comes out. But they do have Sark, and Sark's not dumb. So he's a smart, very, very smart coach. So I think they'll do just fine, but Clemson's going to be a test. I don't think it's going to be in a walk in the park for them there going to Clemson and Arizona State. We'll see what happens. So, but no, for Bama though, no, it was rough, dude. Something we talked about. I know you and Nathan are some happy campers. So I know if Alabama went in there, they were going to wreck shop. So if they played well, however, I think they got the most deserving team in there. I know that's what you guys were looking forward to, and I think that's what the committee did. So, but I know we'll get more into that later into the podcast on like how that sets everything up and what this means on their choice and whatnot. Because they could have won either way, right? It could have been either way, but I'm sure we'll get more into that later. So, but yes, it's been I've been quiet in the shadows all day at work. So, still wore my Bama shirt. I still wore my Bama shirt. So
yeah, I was gonna ask, how hard were you rooting for SMU Saturday night? I imagine you were the biggest SMU fan Saturday night.
Let me be honest. I was the biggest SMU fan 3 minutes into that fucking game. Then I became a fucking huge Clemson fan.
Why?
Let's just be honest.
Why?
Because Clemson freaking scored 14 points in like 2 minutes of that game. If Clemson would have come out with a blowout and won by 3-4 touchdowns.
I get what you're saying, yeah.
Then
but
SMU would have not really had much of a leg to stand on. So with Clemson scoring 14 points in the first 2 minutes of the game, I immediately became a huge Clemson fan.
Yeah,
I mean,
put 60 on them, run it up.
They were up 21 at half. So it's like, dude,
I think it was like 21-6 or 7 or whatever it was.
They were like, oh, dude, this is going to be a 40-point blowout on Clemson, and SMU's done. They're done. But then
he kept swapping back and forth. Back in the fourth quarter, Dalton put his SMU hat back on. He was like, "Come on, pony up!"
Well, as soon as they caught that outside, he threw that out route right there and got within the 3 or the 4 yard line with like 30 seconds left in the game. I'm like, oh yeah, I immediately became an SMU fan. I mean, and then all of a sudden they punch it in and tie it up, and then all of a sudden the kickoff comes out. Clemson returns it like 50 yards, and then they get like a freaking 8-yard pass play, and then just boot a freaking longest kick their kickers ever had. So
the last I feel like minute of that game, absolutely crazy. Like it was like there's no freaking way, because I do feel that if that game went into overtime, no way SMU doesn't win it. Right, like I feel like they had the momentum completely flipped on their side. Their offense was rolling, Clemson's was not at that point in the game. So it's just like, man, dude, if you go to overtime, SMU is about to walk away with this freaking game. So, anyways,
Yeah.
though, here is the bracket that we've got pulled up. This is the final college football playoff bracket. 1 Oregon, 2 Georgia, 3 Boise State, 4 Arizona State. And I know that there's a lot of controversy on that alone, and I will say that I agree with that. It's wild to think that we have a world where Arizona State wins the Power Four or the Big 12, and they're a Power Four school. The committee already said that 3 out of the Big or 4 of the Group 5 and then the Power 4 conferences, 4 of those teams are going to get in no matter what, depending on conference champion. But I think that it's kind of crazy. And yes, my whole point last week was right now we don't have any representatives, and I thought that that was BS. Now, for us to have a first round bye, I also don't agree with that, and it's kind of crazy. So we're like, and again, I just think that we're now setting up a system that's not necessarily rewarding the best teams. I feel like we did the right thing by not allowing 3 lost teams into the playoffs. I feel like that's what you do. You still hold that 10 win minimum requirement, but then now we have a situation. I do think that Boise State deserves to be in that conversation of a first round bye. I do think that they do. But man, Arizona State is where I have my issues with this. And again, coming from a Big 12 fan, I just think that that's the biggest issue that I have with all of it.
You have an issue with them being 4, or you have an issue with Boise State being higher than Arizona State?
I have an issue with I really have an issue with Arizona State having a bye. In general,
Really?
I kind of have an issue with Arizona State and Boise State both having buys. I think
Well, I'm pretty sure they said at the beginning of the year, though, the committee said that when they invented the 12-team playoff, the committee said that all 4 Power 4 conference champions would get the bye.
No, they did.
I mean, that was stated from then. Then they went against that and they put in Boise State. But I see why they did it, right? Because we talked about how you cannot be a 3-loss team and be in the playoff unless you win your conference championship game.
100%.
I understand why they put Clemson at 12. It's because Clemson is the only team that is a 3-loss team in the playoff.
Yeah, and I do think that 12 is appropriate for them. I think that if that's what happens, if you're a 3-loss team, you were the last team to acquire 10 wins, right? They were 9-3 going into that conference championship game. They gained their 10th win. I do think that 12 is appropriate for them. If that's the case, like you barely got in.
Yeah, which is kind of nuts because it doesn't make sense. I know it you can justify it by saying because they're the only team that has 3 losses to put them at 12. But what doesn't justify it for me is the fact that Clemson beat SMU in the conference championship, but I feel like Clemson should be 11 and SMU should be 12 because SMU was on the bubble with Bama in the last minute. So I feel like it only makes sense that SMU should be playing Texas and Clemson should be playing Penn State. Yeah, Penn State. So
yeah, well,
something doesn't make sense. That's what I'm saying. It's a little fishy, but at the end of the day, I think it is what it is. I'm not trying to make a case for Bama. I'm just saying it is what it is here. I just think that with what we've got now, it should have been SMU and Clemson flipped to make sense.
No, and I didn't even honestly think of that until you brought that up. But that is a very good point. That SMU and Clemson, like obviously we just saw in a sense who the better team was, but yet SMU is still ranked higher, and I do think that. Yeah, that's almost unfortunate because I feel that bottom right part of that bracket that you see with SMU, Penn State, then that winner goes to play Boise State. That's the easiest. What is up with this stupid ad? Sorry, is anyone watching Neiman Marcus here?
The CFP committee has just handed James Franklin a freaking golden ticket.
Yeah, well, but it's not even James Franklin because James Franklin has had a history of not being able to win in big games. So SMU
and like SMU.
Well,
I was going to say, with that being said, though, the pressure, like you have your fan base is like, oh well, like we didn't beat Ohio State, you didn't beat Oregon, you competed in the Big Ten championship game, but you still came up short. You can't win the big game. Talk about the pressure. Like if you lose to SMU. Dude, I mean, they'll be calling for his head because They literally gave Penn State a golden ticket to be in the semifinals.
I don't know. This game's going to be at home for Penn State. I mean, you're going to have the whiteout, and God forbid SMU doesn't get a fucking night game. Um,
I think they've
to
already
me personally,
determined it.
Me personally, yeah, look that up. But me personally, regardless, I'm slapping a fucking mortgage on Penn State to win this fucking game. I mean, I'm that fucking confident for them to put a 40 or like 40, 50
Well,
or on
so
them.
here's my issue with Penn State, because I would initially say that I agree with you, and maybe this last week has kind of debunked the idea, but I was worried about Penn State going to play Oregon because I didn't feel that Penn State's offense could hang with a high-powered offense like Oregon's. But we saw that
I agree.
they balled out. They had one hell of an offensive game and balled out versus Oregon. Like 30, 40 plus points. Like that's what we're looking at. And I think that SMU is that similar type of kind of feel as Oregon. They've got a decent enough defense, but really the thing that wins them ball games is that offense. And that's been SMU's kind of identity this entire year. So I kind of see that happening at this point. But again, I don't know. I do think it's going to be, I think it is going to be a pretty solid game, but I do lean a little bit more towards Penn State. Like you're saying, Dalton, it is a home game, but as you can see on your screen here, kicking off the college football playoffs is Indiana Notre Dame, right? A little interstate rivalry.
In-state rivalry. Yeah.
Crazy.
That's going to be nuts.
Yeah, so that'll be a good one to kick us off on Friday, December 20th.
That one will be good because in-state rivalries are always close. I don't necessarily believe that'll be a blowout. I don't think Notre Dame is quite the team that everyone may think they are.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
In Indiana, we don't know how they don't have an identity. Like they haven't played anyone all year, and we all know that. When I think we can all agree on that, right? But they have a good record. But I mean, look at Navy and Army, 10-0. They play Notre Dame and they lose 40-7. But like they lose terrible. Like I'm making that up, but I mean, it was a butt whooping. It just goes to show you can go 10-0. That's fine. But when you have a marquee matchup team that you're going against, it is different. 10-0 don't mean shit. It don't mean dog shit and then when you play a marquee matchup Notre Dame and you get dog whooped, you're humbled. So, but at the end of the day, like DJ said, it's going to be a good game because I don't think Notre Dame is as good as everyone says they are. However, Indiana doesn't exactly have an identity, but with this being an in-state rivalry, I mean, it should be a good game.
I think
you got all these Notre Dame fans licking their chops, and they're like, "Hey, we have a home playoff game. We can't lose." Well, I'm pretty sure you said the same thing week 2 playing NIU. You know what I mean? So everyone talks about. Then Dalton got it right. It talks about how Indiana hadn't really played anybody. They played Ohio State. They got beat up on there.
Yeah, 51-14 was Notre Dame Navy. And Navy
but don't sleep on this football game. Like,
yeah,
it's going to be Friday. It's a night game.
This one should be good.
Yeah, it's don't sleep on it. Like Indiana can come in here and still win. So
we'll see what Indiana's made up for the first time.
Yeah,
I mean, we'll see what they've got this game because this will be the hardest game they've probably played. Well, they did play. They didn't play anyone in the Big Ten this year like crazy good.
They played Ohio State.
Yeah,
they did play Ohio State.
Yeah, they played Ohio State, and they were in it for like the first 2 quarters, and then Ohio State came out at halftime and just bullied them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I say that was kind of a fun watch until it wasn't.
I'm curious just because I'm not sure if Notre Dame is quite the Ohio State, but I wouldn't even know how to compare those two teams. I feel like they're two totally different teams in their style of play. But
and Notre Dame, they almost lost to a bad USC team. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, no, that's what Notre Dame is one of those that kind of has snuck some by. But I do feel like, again, you can almost make that argument for all of these teams. What we're saying about Indiana, we can almost say the same thing about Penn State, right? Penn State, every time they've gone up against some hard competition, like you saw they get their asses beat by Ohio State, played a close game versus Oregon. So now that's now kind of recency bias and a little bit of what we're looking at. But I mean, you can almost say it's like, yeah, you can say that against almost everybody. So I do like it. But Dalton, what you were saying was like, maybe that SMU Penn State game potentially being a night game. It's going to be at 12 p.m. I believe that this is Central Time because it's based off of what I am. So I believe that's 12 p.m. Central Time is what
They're
we're
playing.
looking at.
Oh,
Maybe it is Eastern Time. Maybe an 11 p.m. kickoff CT for us. I'm not sure, but 12 p.m. is
Now-
what we're looking at. So a midday game.
Now, one thing too that's interesting is like what we'll have to be reminded of is, especially for the betting world, understand too that a lot of these marquee teams have been in these situations before. So I'm curious to see how SMU and some of these other teams, Boise State, Arizona State, how they, you know, are they going to get out of these jitters like how soon? These are big games. One and done, you're out. They understand that, but these other teams, Georgia's right. They've been there. They've done it. They've been in the playoffs. So I can see where they may have a little jitters, but they know how to work through that and play these good tight games. Whereas Boise State, I'm curious to see how like them and SMU are going to fare, early, because I feel like if they get behind early like they did Clemson, I don't know if they'll be able to recover with Penn State.
yeah. I think it's crazy you bring it up too. I think it's gonna be. We saw some good fight out of SMU this week. I think with the Arizona State, I think they'll be ready. I mean, technically they played in a playoff game Saturday. It was a win and move on. You know what I mean? It was both teams 10-2. Basically, if you lose, your season's over. It was pretty much a playoff game. The Big 12 championship game was. I'm pretty sure. I'm a Dalton though. It's going to be interesting to see how SMU comes into Penn State. But one thing that people need to understand, SMU's offense is pretty dang good. Like they can score at the best of them, but like Dalton said, if they jump behind early, big, it might be hard to recover. So it's going to be interesting to see how that game goes. I think it's going to be a crazy environment, but at least it's not a night game.
Yeah. Hey, and listen up, Ethan. I'm not taking nothing. I'm not a Bama guy. Right? I was on your side. And guess what? There's only one SEC champ, and it's not y'all. Saw them off. Bear down. Go Bears. Anyways, and we'll prove our worth to the SEC. Baylor's got LSU and their bowl game. And you're like, oh, we're going to sit everybody. I don't care. We're still going to whip that ass.
Bama will be back. Bama will be back. We did this to ourselves, but we'll be back.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, keep those recruits.
It's gonna suck watching these games, but you know what?
I do want to ask y'all something though, real quick.
Fire.
Florida State is left out of the playoffs last year, undefeated conference championship. Don't get in because their quarterback is out.
Yeah,
they leave them out of the playoffs because their quarterback is not going to be able to play in the playoffs. Georgia, what are they? 2-loss team.
Well, and it's
2-loss team, conference champion, quarterback not playing in the playoff.
Yeah,
well,
they left FSU out for the same reason last year. Who was undefeated, by the way?
I think. Go ahead, Alden.
No, real quick. I understand your argument, though. I mean, I get it, but we're now in a new era of playoffs where the rules are if you win, you automatically go. I mean, you can't do anything about it, even if he snapped his ankle and we know for sure he's out. They're going. I mean, and then let's say the what's his name, Stockton, goes in and like, did y'all see that hit he took?
Yeah, right at the end.
He got destroyed.
Dude, imagine if he was out, concussion, boom, done. Like they don't even know if he's going to play. Now third string quarterback. Georgia still has to go because of the rules of the 12-team playoff. They've been talking about all year long. Because they won, they still have to go. So
yeah, I mean, but they did say last year,
but
being
again,
undefeated.
that's
your argument, though.
Yeah,
I mean, if last year, I can see your argument working for them to be out, right? Maybe, but
I just wanted to stir up some feathers.
Well, no, but it isn't.
Not really stir up feathers, just to get people's take on it. I guess
it is an interesting conversation because I do not think that Georgia should be out. Like what you're replacing Carson Beck with a probably 4 or 5 star guy. Like he's not just a scrub that they just pulled out of the stands to say, hey, take a couple snaps, throw a couple balls, and let's see what we can do, right? But I also
It
do.
seems
So
like though Georgia doesn't really get 4 and 5 star QBs. They get like these blue chip
well,
collar quarterbacks,
regardless, whatever it is, like, I bet that this guy's got a little bit of something, and that's kind of my point. So I think that where it's interesting though, like, yes, they won the SEC, and I do see Dalton's point, like, they've got to put 4 out of the 5 groups in, right? SEC is always going to have that slot. Why not throw Georgia in? But it is kind of interesting of like, there is always that Notre Dame. I know that they're an independent. You could have always thrown Boise State to Arizona State, keep them at 4, throw Notre Dame at 3, right? And then have Georgia at 5. And you have the conversation of like, hey, you got your quarterback out. We don't know what this team looks like. This has the potential of being a completely different team. So I do think that Florida State teams or fans have that argument. I think it's naive again to say that Georgia should not belong because of their quarterback situation. They did win the SEC. They're only a 2-loss team, blah, 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 whatever. But I think it's fascinating that, they're still able to lock up a 2 seed, and it's still a tough path. Indiana and Notre Dame are no cakewalks either. So they do have one of the harder paths, because I think that Texas and Penn State, currently at 5 and 6, have probably the easiest. But I think that who has the hardest of this all is Oregon. Oregon.
I was going to say, it's got Oregon, the number 1 seed. Yeah.
Absolutely railed for having an undefeated season. And that's where I think that after this year, this is the kinks that I'm willing to iron out with this college football playoffs. Not allowing 3-loss teams. We don't need to talk about that anymore. But I think that not allowing 3-loss teams was a step in the right direction. So now where this needs to go is it's kind of like the NFL, right? The 1 seed would play the lowest remaining seed available. They will theoretically have the easiest competition. They don't need to say like, hey, we're going to put y'all in these little quads, and then you quads are only going to play each other, and we're going to see kind of how it plays itself out. I think that, again, let's say Indiana, let's look at the left side. Let's say, Nathan, I don't think it's going to happen, but let's say Clemson finds a way to win, Ohio State wins. I don't think that Oregon should have to play Ohio State. I think that Ohio State should probably slip down there to Arizona State. Oregon takes Clemson. 1 versus 12. That's how you keep that idea of like earning your way into the playoffs and having that number 1 seed, because nobody wants to play Tennessee. Nobody wants to play Ohio State. Oregon doesn't even have an option. And then if they win that, then they got to play Arizona State, Clemson, or Texas. And I think obviously the heavy favorite is Texas. So then good job. You get to you have a first round bye. You beat Ohio State, then you get to go play Texas, and then you get to go play whoever the hell else is there. Right? That's crazy to me.
Yeah. I think, we talked, I agree with you. We talked about how the committee handed Penn State a golden ticket, and there's a lot of pressure on James Franklin. I'm a Texas fan. There's a lot of pressure on James Franklin because he hasn't been able to win the big game. There's some pressure on Sark here too, though. I mean, Sark has shown that he can win the big game. He went into Kyle Field and he beat Texas A&M, a rivalry reborn, and 109,000 people. I mean, that's a big game for Texas. It's just he won that game. But on paper, you're a much better football team than Clemson. Much better football team than Clemson, and it's a home game. It's a home playoff game. You should be able to manhandle the trenches in this football game, and Texas could, with the O-line and how good this O-line and D-line is, Texas could not throw the football, and they would probably still be projected to win just because of how good and how seasoned and veteran our O-line is. Like, we should be able to manhandle this this Clemson team, and then you should be able to do the same to Arizona State. But if Sark loses to either Clemson or Arizona State, I mean, that's some pressure too, because like on paper, you have much better football teams than both of those teams. So not only does James Franklin have pressure, I think Sark does too.
Yeah, but I mean that's always kind of the beauty of it. I mean that's why everyone loves March Madness so much, is because you get to see these upsets that happen. But I think that, again, to Texas's demise, and I see the chat with Ethan in there. It's like, Nathan, you and me were kind of talking about this a little earlier, and it's Quinn Ewers, and I think that we talked about it last week with it's just I don't think that he's enough. Obviously, he wasn't enough to win the SEC championship, and that was versus an entire half versus a backup quarterback. And yes, the defense balled out. Anytime you can allow a team to, what was their final score, 22? That was Georgia's final, was 22 or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, but I am agree with
that's
you though.
crazy. I mean, like
Ewers is the
that's a
problem.
good line. Like that's a good amount of points to give up. Like that's a good defensive performance is what I'm saying. If your defense is only allowing 22, you've got to figure out a way to get more. And Georgia does have a good defense, but man, Quinn Ewers, you can just see him making bonehead mistakes. I felt like he got bailed out on a couple of plays here and there too. So no,
Yeah,
I don't
first
think
drive,
that
he
he
threw
is
an
the guy.
interception, and we're moving the ball down the field.
Yeah.
We're moving the ball down the field. First drive, interception, no points.
I think when you have a quarterback, when you have like quarterbacks like Ewers and Manning, I think it makes things real complicated for a coach like Sark. Because, I mean, look at the politics of it. I mean, you've got Ewers, who is considered a top 5 quarterback in the upcoming NFL draft. I mean, what does that do to his stock if you were to pull him and put Manning in? Like, is it worth like ruining his stock? And Texas fans obviously are like, yes, like we want to win the Natty, we want to win at the SEC championship. But you got to remember the relationships that are built between the head coach and the quarterback, and like what you can do. So I know there's some politics that play in it, but let's put that all aside. I feel like with Ewers, we've seen what Ewers can do. I mean, look at what he did the last couple of years at Texas. I mean, he's played in some crazy games, and he's been a very clutch quarterback. For whatever is the reason this year, it's like he came to the SEC, he left, and now he's here, and now it's like I just feel like he's a different guy. I don't know if the SEC is getting to him. I don't know if it's the bigger play, the faster play of the SEC. I don't know, but I still know that he is that quarterback. I know he's got it in him. Um, I know he can do it. He's got an incredibly smart coach, but for whatever reason, I feel like he's holding back. I feel like I don't know if it's a lingering injury that we don't know about. I've thought about it. I mean, I've sat there and watched him, and it's like half the time I feel like he's scared to get hit, or if it's just an injury that he's trying to like not. He's trying to avoid again. I don't know if it was that hit that he had with Bama when we knocked him out of that game. Like he's taking some big hits at the quarterback position, and so I don't know if he's just it's all mental, if it's all upstairs more so than it is just his play, which I think this is affecting him. I think it's
He
all
doesn't. Yeah, I think when you talked about his stock and to what Ethan said, is Ewers good enough to win a natty? It depends on what Ewers shows up. Here in the last couple of games that I've seen, no.
well. And
No,
look what
because your
Bama,
defense can only bail you out so much. But if you go back to last year, the Ewers that played against Alabama, if that Ewers shows up, there ain't a team in this playoff that'll beat us with that defense.
yeah. I mean,
So, but like you said though,
like that's all it
yeah,
is.
but like you said though, when he's in the pocket, he looks nervous to me. He looks like he's scared to take the hit and I don't know what it is. I'm a, like you said, like we always say, like you're going to root for your team and you think your team's the best team. I think this Texas team is good enough to win the national championship. I think this defense is good enough to win the national championship, but it really comes down to how Quinn Ewers is going to play, and I hope he gets something figured out. But with his stock, I think his stock's already plummeted. There is no the stock's already plummeted. Whether Sark pulls him or not, it's gone down. You can't have happy feet in the pocket and be nervous in the pocket and play in the NFL. So
Look, I mean, we see this at the NFL level too. I mean, we see quarterbacks that should be pulled out long times ago. Like, right? It's like goodness gracious, like why is this guy still playing? Like put in somebody else. Like, and I think it's just the relationships that are built. Like it's easy for us to sit here and Monday morning quarterback it and be like, take him out, he's freaking garbage. But I think a lot of times there's a lot of politics that comes into this, especially at the college level. But I think in order to win that national championship, and this is my last input on this, is look what Bama did. And I'm saying this because I can only remember, but y'all remember when we took out
Hurts.
Jalen Hurts and we put in, or when it was Tua and we put in Jalen Hurts and he threw and won us that national championship.
no, you took out Hurts and put in Tua, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and then we hit Devontae Smith. Right. So sometimes you're going to have to make those tough decisions, and you're going to have to pull those quarterbacks out and make that decision right there, even if it's in the national championship. right? You got to make that decision. You can't just keep rolling with what you got, right? It's too
Y'all
dry.
are
Yeah,
living in
I think.
another fantasy world compared to what the rest of I feel like college football is living in. Y'all are talking
What do you
about the
mean? He's
luxury
not.
of pulling out Tua and putting in Jalen and pulling out Ewers and putting in Manning. It's like, good God, like why is this
But
even?
we're
I
talking
get the
about what
conversation,
Texas
but
needs to
like
do to
it's
win a
wild.
national championship.
No, I get it. That's what I'm
If
saying. Like, y'all done a hell of a job recruiting, but man, like that is
that Georgia game, the first Georgia game, if Ewers comes out against Clemson like that, Sark can't wait 2 quarters to do that. Like especially like if Ewers if Ewers is going to be playing like he did in the first Georgia game throughout the playoffs, at some point you have to be like you have to make the move. You have to.
yeah.
I don't think there's a way that you don't make that move, especially with on paper, like I said earlier, like on paper, you being way better football team on paper than Clemson and Arizona State. If it comes down to it, I think you have to make the move if you need to. But it all depends on what Ewers shows up, though. So we'll see what happens.
So all of this to say, currently, I think we can all agree that the easiest path to get in, Penn State definitely got the better end of the stick. This Penn State SMU, I don't want to leave SMU out of the conversation simply because they're the lower seed. I think that SMU has potential, obviously, to beat this Penn State team. I think that Penn State is going to have clear and obvious struggles versus an offense like that. We saw them hang with Oregon, so there is a conversation to be had there. But I think that that's how they have to be competitive versus teams like this with higher powered offenses. So I do think that is going to be a highly competitive game. And I'm not even saying all of this to shit on Boise State. Boise State, I think, is a really solid team as well. But obviously, if you're looking at the rest of this bracket, I think that Boise State's probably one of the easier ones. Arizona State, we don't really know what they're truly capable of as well. So I think that that's another easiest bracket. But then we see the top 2 seeds, right? 1 and 2 probably have the hardest outing of it all. Thankfully, they just have the first round bye because then following that, their schedule is one hell of a ride to get all the way to the
I don't know.
national.
I do think that Georgia's not too bad. I don't think it's like super easy, but I feel like playing either Indiana or Notre Dame.
Yeah,
I feel like
Yeah,
I bet Oregon right now is wishing that they had Georgia's bracket right about now.
yeah. Well, I mean,
But
like,
not to mention though, we say we say that Georgia might like their spot. Notre Dame might be happy with where they're at too.
I would say
You know what I
Georgia's
mean?
where they're at. I think
Yeah,
Georgia decided to play
yeah,
someone
yeah,
other than SEC. I think
yeah.
knowing that they're either going to get Indiana or Notre Dame. Like I said, I think Georgia knows Notre Dame is not quite the team that everyone thinks they are. But I think what Georgia might be worried about is their quarterback play with, with, um,
Without Beck,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why I'm saying Notre Dame might be happy
But
with where they're at because
Stockton did play well. He did play good, coming in as a backup. I thought the game was over at that point. I thought Texas was going to make the comeback and definitely take over business there. But Stockton really came out. He's a 4-star quarterback, so he's not 5, but he is a 4-star. But he came in looking pretty relaxed. They got him to run the ball a couple times, so we know he can run it. He runs it hard. And he looked like he threw pretty well on the run. I'm going to be honest. And it looked like his reads, he actually was more confident with his arm than Carson Beck. I honestly felt like Georgia played a lot better Georgia football without Carson Beck. I'm going to be honest. I thought Georgia looked a lot more dominant after they lost Beck. And I think Georgia actually can kind of hang their hat on that, knowing that Stockton kind of came in and actually played decently well. I wouldn't say that he was
yeah, but
dominant.
it's going to be
He wasn't
he's going to
dominant
have to
by
put
any
a
means. I would
no.
just
They
say
were
that
just able to run the ball.
yes, not dominant.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say he's going to go out there and win you a natty, but I would say that he is somebody that can get it done if Georgia's defense can get it done. I think he's
yeah.
definitely that type of quarterback that could bode well for them and help them, carry the weight. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, we've only seen one game with them, but he didn't look too bad.
Yeah, well, especially now. Now there's a lot of weight on this kid's shoulders.
Hmm
Uh,
Hey,
so
this guy here could be their starting quarterback next year.
it's a
You
good
can make
possibility he
you
does.
can make him a
But
case right now. Like, what if he wins the national championship with Georgia, comes in as a sophomore next year and just like, let's go, bitches.
Yeah,
Let's
no, I
go.
mean, 100%. I do think that that's kind of obviously what he's
Let's see
fighting
what
for.
happens.
And if not, if he wants to transfer out, like, I think that he obviously is going to make a really good name for himself as well. So the last thing that I want to jump into before we hop off, though, if we take a look here at FanDuel Sportsbook, we can see the opening odds of these 4 games that we were looking at for the college football playoffs this first round.
Hey, before you tell us, let's go ahead and make some picks and who we think will win.
Yeah,
Before we
let's get
Well,
some let's get some picks on who we think's going to win in the first round. But I do want to ask you one question though, because both of y'all, and I should have asked it earlier, and I got lost my train of thought, and I didn't. Both of y'all didn't like Arizona State or Boise State having a bye. If you're sitting on the committee, Dalton, I want to know who you would put in at 3 and 4, and DJ, I want to know who you would have put in at 3 and 4.
So for me, I'd have to go back, but I think this is an adjustment they're going to make. It's not really determined quite yet or like solidified that this is the case. But what I think the committee is going to talk about and something that they're going to heavily consider is after the conference championship games, I think they're going to go back and look and see where the cards lie. And I agree with you guys. If you make it to the conference championship game, at this point, I don't think you should be penalized. However, I after the games are over, the shift will happen for the top 1 through 12 teams, right? And I would say that the top 4 will get their buys. Like it's not the conference championship winners. It'll be the top 4. Which kind of worries me in the fact that the conference championships will lose some value if they do that. But I do think that that's what they're going to do to reward those top 4 teams. Um, that's what I'm looking at them doing. And I don't really want to go down this rabbit hole, but I do think that because we talked about this a lot the last episode, but I think that the committee has to do a better job of strength of schedules. I'm like I said, I'm not making the case for Alabama right now, but what I'm saying is SMU. I feel like, and Nick Saban kind of brought this up, and some other people did too. I think Kirk Herbstreit kind of hit on it as well. But if the committee had done a better job doing their strength of schedule, SMU should have been probably sitting around 13, 14, playing in their conference championship to fight for the playoffs, not to stay in the playoffs, which kind of put them in that pickle because they were at 8. Um, if they had looked at their strength of schedule, I think they would have been sitting around flirting with that 11, 12. They would have been in, fighting to stay in. Whereas the fact that they were already in and they lost, that's what kind of put them in that, okay, do we value the strength of schedule or do we value the conference championship? Whereas they could have gotten the best of both worlds if they just would have done the strength of schedule, because then if they win the conference championship, they're in and it's still valued. But if they lose the conference championship, they're out. If they would have just stayed with the strength of schedule. And
I don't know.
I
I understand it, but I do feel like that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate like Monday like quarterback, right? That you're talking about, because you don't know how teams are going to be at the end of the year. Well, it's like, no, my thing is like in terms of strength of schedule, you don't know how teams are going to fare by the end of the year. Like, SMU, I don't even remember who they played on their schedule, but it's like if all of these other teams were undefeated and they ended up throughout their schedule played 2 undefeated teams up to their point in the season, then obviously they would have had 2 really good quality opponents who are probably ranked at this point in the season. That's just nothing that you can predict. That's what me and Nathan were talking about with Texas' schedule. Like, yes, you joined the SEC, but realistically you had a cakewalk because of the 16 teams in the SEC. You played 16, 15, 13, 12, 11, and 10. You played all of the bottom 7, 8 teams of the SEC except for 1 or 2 of them, and that's it, right? Yeah, you played Georgia, you lost. You played Georgia again, you lost. Every other SEC team that you played was at the bottom of the barrel, and you did win, and you had pretty commanding victories. So it's like, yeah, you can look at Texas' strength of schedule, and we can say the same thing. So why is Texas at 5, right? So it really is hard to predict. I do think that Texas is a top 5 team, right? But it's hard to say that like the committee needs to do a better job or whoever's making these schedules need to do a better job just simply because you don't know. I would have never said that SMU first year joining the ACC would have been a 1-loss team through 12 games. I would have never said that.
I mean, And like to kind of just go off what you're saying, I'm not saying that Texas was right or any other team's right. I'm not saying SMU was the only team that was wrong. I'm
Right.
just saying I would have liked the committee to do a better job doing the strength of schedules because it would have eliminated and cleaned up a lot of this mess that we currently saw. I think, and that's all Nick Saban was saying too. There was just there was it seemed like the strength of schedule really wasn't a considering factor, which led to all these issues leading to who was going to be
I
in
mean,
the top 12. I think Texas may have been a little too high as well. I think they played great games. They showed that they were a very strong team defensively, but I feel like even when Ewers and the offense looked like they were playing a terrible game, it seemed like they either stayed at 2 or 3 or went up. And I was like,
right, but I mean
like
that
don't
again,
get me
that
wrong,
goes into the
I don't
conversation
think
of like there's always going to be 8 really good teams throughout college football, and like those are just the 8 teams, and that's just going to be Texas, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Penn State. Like those are always going to be those teams. If you don't schedule those teams realistically, you don't know how your strength of schedule is going to fall into play.
I wouldn't necessarily say that based on what we saw happen to Michigan.
Because
I
look
will-
what
I will-
look what
I
look
will
what
say
Arizona
this.
State did though as well. Arizona State went out there and they scheduled an SEC game, week 2. They went out and scheduled Mississippi State. Who knows? Like whenever they make these schedules, you sign these media contracts for 3-4 years in advance, and you don't know how these teams are going to turn out. And they went out there and they beat Mississippi State. Right? It's a bad SEC team, but like what are they supposed to? What? Yeah, but what are they supposed to do about that? Like, you know what,
Right.
they
When
did their job and like let's get
Mississippi
an
State-
SEC opponent in here and let's go beat their ass, and they did
No,
it.
I
Turns
honor
out they were
that.
bad.
That's awesome. I'm glad they did, and who knew Mississippi State was going to be a freaking like 2-11 freaking SEC team? You know what I'm saying? Who knew that was going to happen? That they were going to struggle this bad? And that was the case. And Arizona State scheduled them. They weren't that bad the year prior, but unfortunately Arizona State got them. And I think that ultimately hurt their strength of schedule. I think it
It
should
did.
have
That's
hurt them,
what
right?
I'm saying. Like you truly don't know, but they're like, well, I've got an SEC win. Like fuck. Like
But we
what
can
am I
agree
supposed
on
to
that.
do?
And at the end of the day, I think the committee moving into next year, they need to look less at the record and more at the strength of schedule, right? I do think, like for instance, DJ. But to say this, to be fair, I do think if Baylor goes out and plays and they go undefeated, I do think that they should be a top 10 team.
But that's
Regardless, if
but
you're
again,
undefeated-
that's what I'm saying.
because
Like that's our extent is like we're a top 10 team, and then like realistically, Baylor goes undefeated, it goes into their conference championship, whatever. Like, we're probably looking at 7. And I do think that it's a situation like SMU. If we go 7 and we lose our conference championship, I don't think they're gonna be like, Baylor, you're out. But damn, dude, that's what we're gonna see. Baylor's a 1-loss team. Their only loss is in their conference championship, and we're gonna be down there at 11. And it's like, well,
yeah, but the only thing
frick,
that I would
bro.
say is if Baylor goes 11-0 and Georgia loses one game, let's say they lose to a 8-3, Ole Miss, I still would make the argument that Georgia would still be ranked higher than an undefeated Baylor, right? Because of
I mean,
strength of schedule.
sure, yeah, but like
That's the only thing.
that's
Now a 2-loss, yeah, Baylor would get ahead. But
it-
1 loss, 8-3 against an Ole Miss, that's a really tough Ole Miss and a really tough conference. I would still say that Georgia's ranked ahead of an undefeated Baylor.
and like I get
Until
that.
Baylor get more SEC or harder games. And
I
then
get
I'd
that
be like, okay,
conversation,
Baylor-
and like that's where I was trying to get at last week was if we wanted to include 3-loss teams, we could drop all the way down to like 33 teams or 35 teams who either have anywhere from 0 to 3 losses, and it's like that's a big pool. That is a big pool. Obviously, we can chop that down to 20 and then like, okay, now we've really got a conversation. But just by simply taking out 3-loss teams, you took that pool from about 35 to about 17. And then that's where I'm fine with now let's look at strength of schedule, because I do agree that a 2-loss Georgia team is probably better than an undefeated Baylor team. And I wholeheartedly get that. And Jamar Chase
How
is
good
currently
do rank?
You still need
fucking
strength
me
of
in
schedule.
fantasy football.
Oh, Jamar.
Yeah.
I would say that you still need to do strength of schedule in top 5. Like it needs to be everywhere. Strength of schedule. I mean, that's how you determine 1 and 2.
Yeah.
No, that's what I'm saying. But like,
what-
let's look at 1. Sorry, Nathan. I know I keep cutting you off, but 0, 1, and 2 loss teams. If you're a 3 loss teams, you're out of the conversation. And then I do think that a strength of schedule conversation is valid, 100%. But I think that there needs to be a win minimum that you need to hit, right? And I think that that's 10 wins. In order for Clemson to get 10 wins, guess what they had to do? They had to play in their conference championship. If you hit 10 wins, then you can join the conversation. If you don't, you're out. Get out, leave the chat. You're done. I don't even want to join it because it's just a lot of cloudy confusion, and we're comparing, two really bad losses to, well, I had a really good win, but you still had 2 really bad losses. Right? Like, okay, and it's not just y'all. It was Ole Miss, and it was South Carolina.
Ole Miss, South Carolina had bad losses too. Yeah.
Every 3 loss teams did.
Nathan, go ahead. But DJ, save that thought. I want to add something to that real quick. But Nathan, go ahead.
All I want to say is, like, when we were watching the committee, and I was talking to my little brother, and I'm a firm believer that I do believe that your strength of schedule matters. But what I was trying to there was something that Nick said that really kind of bothered me. Nick Saban said he said Bama has 3 ranked wins over top 25 teams. He was like, how do you leave them out of the playoffs? And I said, you're right, dude. You're right. So put Kansas in.
Yeah.
Put Kansas in. And then that's what I was arguing with my little brother about. He was like, Alabama beat. And I'm only saying Alabama because Alabama and Kansas had the same amount of wins over ranked top 25 teams. Teams who are currently ranked in the top 25, yep. Bama and Kansas have the same amount of wins. So I was telling Seth, your strength of schedule does matter, but your losses have to matter as well. If your losses don't matter, and if you're going to say that Bama needs to be in, or Ole Miss, or South Carolina, or whoever else need to be in because they beat 3 top 25 ranked teams, well, then put in a 5-loss Kansas because they have the same amount.
Hey, I get that argument.
That's all I was saying.
No, I get that. The only reason I would just disagree on that is because of the fact that that's a fair point, but Alabama did go 3-1 against top 25 ranked teams, but I don't know who Kansas played in the top 25, so I believe you, but I want to see the comparisons between the top teams that were won between those. All we know is that Bama did beat. The biggest win was they beat Georgia. They kicked Georgia's ass the first half, but then Georgia came back.
Yeah,
Bama did beat Georgia, so that I don't know if Kansas can beat that top. That kind of, I think, would still set that edge. So even with those wins, you're still looking at the strength of schedule as a whole of the whole regular season. Now Bama did play other teams in the top 25, but they also had some really tough competitive games. I mean, our non-conference games, don't get me wrong, were a walk in the park other than Wisconsin. But as a whole, I still feel like strength of schedule would be a lot harder than Kansas, consider you're in the SEC. But that is a fair point.
So Kansas beat Colorado. Kansas beat Arizona State.
I'm going to say I got it up right
now.
They
beat Iowa State. And they beat Kansas State is not currently ranked, but Kansas State was ranked 16 when Kansas beat Kansas State.
Well, no, they lost. So they lost to Kansas State. If we look at their last,
they did lose to Kansas State.
Yeah. So
they beat Kansas State.
Looking at their last 5 weeks. So 5 weeks ago, or however you want to look at it. I know that there's kind of an open week. So, anyways, they're 5 games ago. Lost to Kansas State, who was currently 16 at the time. Lost to them by 2 points. But then the following week, they go and beat Iowa State, who is just a representative in the Big 12 conference game, right? They beat them by 9 points. Then they go travel to BYU, which is not a fun place to play. BYU was 6 at the time. They beat BYU 17-13, and then they play Colorado and beat Colorado 37-21. They were the first team with a losing record to win 3 straight ranked games. First team in college football history to ever do that.
Yeah, ever to do it.
And then guess what? Last week of the season, they could play Baylor. Baylor put that put that foot on the throat. Won 45-17.
And I'm not saying I'm not saying that their schedule was tougher than Alabama's. I was just trying to tell, like, my little brother, is that just because you beat 3 ranked top 25 teams doesn't automatically give you a bid to the playoffs, because that's what I was trying to tell Seth. That's why your strength of schedule matters, but who you lose to
Right.
matters
But
as
I don't
well.
think he was saying it was an automatic bid. I think he was just saying that that was something that they needed to consider in the resume against SMU. Um, but I would say too, and like they had a damn good resume to Bama did have a leg to stand on. I will say that. Even though people may disagree, but I do think that them choosing SMU was more of a a deserving type. They went the more the deserving route.
Now you just got to be consistent. So now that's what I want to see. You left Bama out this year at 9-3, with a lot of people who believe that they deserve to be in. Okay, so if next year, if Georgia's in the same spot, I want to see the same thing.
Or Texas,
I want
yes.
to, yeah, anybody. If you're gonna if now we saw what you did, now be consistent.
Now,
That's what I want. I want to see consistency.
now
And
here's
if you have 3 losses and you're out, stick to it. Don't change it up. Stick to it.
well, and I will say, you know, the only issue with that, and we saw what Greg Byrne and I keep up a lot with the Bama news and also Lane Kiffin, the SEC as a whole, but I will say the only precedent that this has caused, and this is what I was saying we were going to get into later, Nathan, earlier in the episode, and I think we're here now, right? What did this mean based on the decision of the committee? The committee chose to go
Yeah,
the route of the conference championship, right? So now there's more value in the conference championship.
which is
I
a good
agree.
thing.
I
That's a
agree
positive.
because
Okay,
if they took that out, it's bad.
right. Now, here's the thing. The strength of schedule is now completely way it's not even a value anymore. So what I'm saying with that is Greg Byrne had come through and said, "Hey, in the upcoming years, we're scheduled to play Ohio State, Oregon, FSU, Notre Dame." He goes, "We are now reconsidering our options. We now are thinking about keeping the same non-conference games we currently have, such as Mercer's, um, the Citadels, the New Mexico States."
Is this Lane Kiffin? You said.
No, this is Greg Byrne, the athletic director of Alabama, because we are scheduled as non-conference games to not only play our SEC games, which are incredibly fucking tough, right? But we were scheduled, but we're not playing all. Don't get me wrong, we're not scheduled to play all these games in one year. It's like one or two after non-conference games. So like it would be Notre Dame and Ohio State one year, and then the next year it would probably be the rest, right? FSU and
Yeah.
what the other one I said. So it wouldn't be all of them. But Greg Byron's like, no, like, and I think people took that the wrong way. He was saying, well, we're now reconsidering our non-conference games, and people were like, y'all didn't fucking play nobody for your non-conference games other than Wisconsin. But that's not what he was saying. He was saying, no, we are currently scheduling to play these Big Ten games, these big games that people want to see these marquee matchups against. But he's like, now we're reconsidering because we obviously see that the strength of schedule is not really a determining factor. And if we lose 3 games again, not only to the SEC, but to like an Ohio State or a Notre Dame, then why would we play them? So he's like, no, we're going to keep what we got. We're going to continue to do
Well,
New
you
Mexico
you
State.
play you play them because you can still lose 2 games in your conference playing a conference championship
Right,
game.
but you can still
And
you can
but
still
Texas, they're playing Ohio State week 2 next year. The
right,
week
but
after and then the next year they're playing Ohio State, and
valid.
then they're doing Notre Dame. So like Sark wants that matchup. He wants that matchup. He
But
wants to do that, and
I would
I like it. I like it
Well,
because
I would disagree only because of the fact is because what if let's say that Texas goes and loses to Georgia next year, right? And then let's say that they schedule Notre Dame and Ohio State, and they lose to them both. Let's say they lost. Let's say Texas comes out and they're number 2 next year. They lose to Georgia. They drop back to like 6. Let's say they.
Sorry. I was laughing at the chat. Sorry, Jay. That's a good one.
Oh, let's say they drop back to 6, right? Texas does after losing to Georgia. Now they go play Ohio State and they lose. They now drop back to like 10. And then they go and they play a few weeks later, they go and play Notre Dame and they lose again. It's non-conference games, but now they're sitting at 15 or 16, right? But now you're still going to the conference championship. But the problem is because you lost those non-conference games, you now have to win your conference championship to go to the playoffs. You scheduled a harder non-conference games. That's on you, buddy. You fucking lost
I
them, and now you have to
I
win the
know
conference
that's
championship.
I like it.
The
To
thing, my
me
thing
though,
is
I
like,
like it.
I
I'd
But
wait.
hold on, Jay.
Wait it
Jay,
out.
I know Jay ain't talking trash in the chat because your team ain't even a conference, brother. You grow some nuts and join a conference. Don't come talk to us, okay? Grow some nuts and join a conference, okay?
I mean, Indy did. I feel like Indy did a good enough job of making their case for the college football playoffs. I do think they're going to find themselves in a situation here, Jay, where they may lose one of these games that they really need to win, and it's going to completely backfire in their face. But I don't know. I think this year though,
All I'm
they
going to
got
say
it.
this before we get into picks.
Notre Dame's fucking scared.
Yeah, before we get into picks,
Jay, don't
I
let him
want
get you. His team's out
I
of the
just
playoffs.
want the committee to show. I just want committee to show consistency. You showed everybody in the college football world that your second loss in a conference championship game does not affect you. Okay, we get it. You showed everybody you showed everybody your cards. Just be consistent now. That's all I'm asking for. You can't do it this year. Leave Alabama out with 3 losses, and then go into next year and say, hey, well, Alabama's going to be in the playoffs because they're only a 2-loss team, and their second loss came in the SEC. Say if Alabama loses the SEC championship next year, but they're still in a game with 2 losses, and Georgia's knocking on the door with 3 losses and didn't play in the SEC championship game, don't put Georgia in.
So yeah, and I mean
That's what I'm saying now. So be consistent.
And that's my thing though with all of this is like I get y'all's side of the like, well, let's just schedule Mercers and New Mexico States. I get that. Like, and if I were you, like that is maybe one side of the card that you do want to play. But I think that again, like where it comes down to it is you're in a situation where I think that Texas did a good enough job of scheduling some decent non-conference games this year, and that's basically where we got to see Texas's true ability versus the not SEC, and it turned out that the SEC schedule that Texas did play
He said I got some King Kong nuts. He got some baby Kong nuts. That's what he got.
But anyways, so what I'm saying with that though is like that's where your ability to separate yourself from the conference in Texas to be that first team out of the teams that have these buys and set themselves up in a situation where they do have the opportunity to play the 4 seed in that first overall buy, because technically that is the worst team that has that first round bye. So I think that that's kind of the cards that you play in that. Sure, if you want to schedule these Mercers in these New Mexico states and do that's fine. But you can still afford to lose 2 of those.
Unless you're Auburn, don't schedule it.
Pause.
Yeah, don't pay millions and lose millions to lose.
You're Auburn, don't schedule it.
Right. Yeah. No kidding. But I mean, like, that's my thing is like you can lose 2 of those non-conference games because like that's like Clemson in a sense, right? Clemson only lost 2 of their conference games. They're a 3-loss teams, and they were able to play in their ACC championship. So like Alabama always has that possibility. You can lose all of your non-conference games, go undefeated in the SEC, win the SEC championship, and it doesn't matter how many conference or how many losses you had that are non-conference games.
Right. But the argument I'm making that I'm trying to
I get it, but I don't think that because you're saying what you're saying is that strength of schedule should have been weighted.
Don't run the risk to lose that game. I get where Dalton's
coming
from.
And I mean like I can say the same thing about Baylor. Like why, if we can only lose 1 game a season in the Big 12, like why would I think
it affects the Big 12 and the ACC.
Yeah, like
more.
we're on 2. We are literally in 2 different tax brackets. We're comparing apples to oranges. I see it in y'all's case because y'all's case can compete with these Big 10 teams early on in the season. Whereas like Baylor and Kansas that we had just mentioned earlier, we are 2 completely different teams the last 4 or 5 weeks of the season. You caught us in the very beginning, and it's like we lose to anybody. We lose to Mercer. We'd make that game competitive in the beginning of the season. Like shit, but you catch us back at the back end of the season, and it's like nobody's safe, right? You can put us up. I felt like anybody, and I know that's a stretch, but you could put us up against almost anybody, and we're rocking and rolling with it, right? What we got in the comments going on? I see a lot.
We're getting after each other right now.
I see a lot of nuts.
They quit talking to
Yeah,
us. They
Jay
quit talking to
Jay
us, now
just
they're talking
mad.
to each other.
Jay mad because Notre Dame can't play with the big boys, and we're gonna find it. We're gonna get the same Notre Dame we always get in the playoffs, where the committee we're gonna put Notre Dame in, and they're gonna get beat up on.
Hey, bring your rainbows, bring your gold. All I know is y'all
I,
gonna need
I,
all the left
and
teams.
Darth Ducky,
We do need to
want to
pick. We do need
mention.
to make picks.
We do, and then we'll hop off of this. But I did want to. Darth Ducky made a good point that there will be no consistency with the committee, and I do agree. And that's
No,
kind
there
of the
probably
premise.
won't. I would like
and
to
there
see
never
it, though.
there
That's
never
my
has
thing.
been, and
I
I
just
think
wanna
that
see it.
that's where we need something on paper of like, bro. So,
10 wins. You got to have 10 wins.
Nathan, they're coming after you, my boy. Um,
Throw a neck.
His beard's hiding it.
all right, but anyways,
Yeah, I'm just hiding it.
my thing is with it is put it on paper. Say you need to be a 10-win team. Like, you can't continue to have all of this vagueness floating around in the air, and I was having this conversation about who's the better team, because no matter what, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Texases will always be the best teams. The Notre Dames will always be the best teams. Why? Because they have decades worth of recruiting kind of going through that system, right?
What makes Notre Dame the best teams, though? Because if you go and look at it, they just play ACC schools and then they lose to Northern Illinois.
Well, and Darth Ducky brought up a good point. I mean, we could get to a point where no team has 10 wins. I mean, theoretically, yes, because to do with the NIL, that's a whole nother thing. But I do think that we are becoming a farm team of the NFL. Like, we're getting to the point now where it's hard to win either way you look at it, because you're going to start seeing people leave Michigans and Alabamas and Georgias and Texases to go to these smaller schools because you got the NIL, right? They're going to chase money. So, I mean, we could get to a point where, NIL is going to create a more even landscape along college football. That's a good thing if you look at it that way, but I think it's a bad thing when it comes down to every year your team may have a different team. I mean, you could have a new quarterback every single year. I mean, you could have. I mean, you're
Well,
gonna have people being stolen left.
I do think that the transfer
I mean,
portal needs more regulations as well. And this is all stuff that's new that they need to get figured out, because I mean, it's crazy that the transfer portal works the way that it does, and we're seeing that these players are playing on 5 different teams by the end of their collegiate career, and it's just like, man, that's just absolutely crazy, right? So I do think that there needs to be something with that, so that way it does create a little bit more consistency, and we can kind of see that kind of grow through. And I think that, again, that will kind of spread the wealth a little bit, again, coming from a Baylor fan. So I don't know. I think that there's ways to do it, not allowing 3-loss teams in here, and I think Darth Ducky put it great. I think that there is a point, though. I mean, technically we could see a situation where there are no 10-loss teams, but just improbable, but theoretically that is possible. I don't think that that'll happen. I think you'll always have a situation where you can make an argument and find 12 teams that are really good competitive teams with double-digit wins.
Hey, I will say this, though, before we go. Alabama, based on the decision from the committee, this is from Funny Main on Twitter. They had come out with Alabama's schedule next year. So for week 1, we're playing AG Gaston Boys Club 10U.
Shut the hell up. Let's look here at FanDuel Sportsbook and the current.
Hey, week 4, we got Phoenix Online.
That's great.
We do finish the year with Auburn. Hey, but I think we'll definitely go 12-0 on this season, and we should hopefully go finish top 5. I'm hoping. So based on that, since we're not going to look at strength of schedule, so.
Hey, yeah, I feel like that's a great way to get in. Everyone would say that's probably a Big 12 schedule. So congrats, y'all got it figured out.
It kind of looks like SMU's and Indiana's. So.
Yeah, you'll have it. Hey,
yeah, I want to get on these. I want to get on these picks. I want to see what everyone picks for their upset round 1.
And Dalton, you'll have a great job getting recruiting. It's creating real pro potential with that schedule. Anyways, though, looking here at our interstate rivalry between Indiana and Notre Dame. Right now, they're opening up Notre Dame as 7.5-point favorites. So I personally am going Indiana plus 7.5 in that matchup. I think a touchdown, more than a touchdown, is absolutely crazy. So even if Notre Dame wins by a touchdown, we still cover at 7.5. I'm not talking money lines here, but if I had to pick a money line, if I'm being completely honest, I I'll probably lean Notre Dame, and I think that may be the only win that they get in this college football playoffs.
Are we getting our picks in?
Yeah.
Okay,
go with
sorry about it,
spreads and
Jay.
money
You
line.
ain't played shit all year. Give me Indiana, brother. Indiana's
money
going to
line?
go in there. Give me Indiana. They're going to win. The statue Jesus ain't saving you today.
Oh, my God.
They're losing.
All right, Dalton, follow that up.
Well, I would probably say for me, like I had already mentioned it earlier. Well, I think with it being an in-state rivalry, I think it's going to be a lot closer than we think. Like I said, Indiana, we don't really have an identity for them because we don't know who the fuck they've played all year. Notre Dame has had some really close matchups. I'm gonna go with DJ. I'm gonna take that positive plus 7.5. For Indiana with this matchup. I think it could be a close game considering it's rivalry. Rivalries, we know how that goes. It's always close. I mean, we all thought Texas was going to blow out A&M, and I mean, it was a good game. Texas still played a good game, but I mean, even look at Alabama and Auburn. I mean, every single year it's close. It's the rivalries. The rivalry matchups are always going to be close, even if you're playing someone who's 1-10 and you're 10-1. It's going to be close. So I think this is going to be a lot closer than we think. I'm going to take that plus 7.5.
I do. I think that Notre Dame has had a decent enough schedule, but like I said, because I think that they made their case in who they've played this year, and it was good enough to where no one's arguing about them not having a conference championship game and having to prove their worth. I think they did a decent enough job of proving their worth up to this point in the year, but I think, again, like we were saying, the interstate rivalry, it is good. Right? It is good. So anyways, though, Indiana, though, 7.5, I like. Money line is hard for me to take for them, but I do think it'll be a close game, so I do like it. Anyways, though, next game, SMU Penn State. SMU is my underdog. I don't see a situation where Penn State is able to hang into this game. Also, I want to go back to Darth Ducky's comment. Her tickets were roughly $1,000 on the low end for that Indiana game. Are we spending that money? Are we spending $1,000 to go to watch our team play? Anyway, no. I feel like give me at home. I can motherfuck that TV every.
He said Notre Dame is 9-3 against the spread. Well, they're about to be 9-4, brother. So
my couch is comfy and door dashing is not bad.
I've done my research. You about lost to a terrible USC school, and you lost to Northern Illinois. Oh, I'm telling you right now, Indiana's going to beat Notre Dame.
Shit. All right, though. SMU, who do we got? I've got SMU plus 8.5. I will also grab their money line on that as well. So my two winners, Notre Dame and SMU.
I'm gonna put. I mentioned this one earlier too. I'm gonna go ahead and lay my mortgage on Penn State's money line and then pay for next month's rent.
Gracious.
I'm with Dalton.
Next month's mortgage.
You gotta think though, dude. It's gonna be colder than hell. This team's from Dallas. You know.
This team's from Dallas. It's SMU. They throw the ball a lot. If it's cold as fuck, we saw what happened with these cold games just recently in the NFL. So it could be a ground and pound game, and I think Penn State's got it all day long.
I don't know.
I'm going Penn State. Yeah.
Give me.
I don't think SMU covers.
Okay. What about the spread?
Covers.
8.5. Y'all are still taking Penn State minus 8.5.
I am.
Bro, Penn State's gonna win by 50, bro. What do you mean?
I was actually gonna take the over
for that.
53.5 because I think SMU can score a touchdown.
SMU can score more than a touchdown, and they're definitely going to do that versus Penn State.
I'm with Darth Ducky here, DJ. You're high for picking SMU against the spread. I'm agree with Darth Ducky here. You're crazy.
Taking Penn State money line.
Absolutely not. Kevin Jennings, I'm telling y'all, not a lot of people have watched SMU games, but this cat is built different. We have a recency bias because we've seen Penn State's offense operate against Oregon. Oregon's defense, kind of wish-washy. We see Penn State run against Midway defense, right? And it's just like, we don't know what that Penn State offense is doing. Because of that, it's hard to imagine a world where Penn State can keep up with SMU. Now, saying that, SMU has got to get rolling, okay? That's clearly what it is. So, anyways, Give me SMU plus 8.5 and the money line. Dalton, I'm telling you, if you put your mortgage on that plus 245, you can pay for your next couple months worth of rent. Idiot. Anyways, Clemson, Texas, 11.5. That is quite aggressive. 11.5. Say what? Dalton, you lead this one off then.
I'm taking me personally plus 11.5 with Clemson. I do think Texas can win this game, but I do think that's quite inflated. I don't know. Texas's offense is kind of wishy-washy right now. Their defense is amazing. I think Clemson's defense is pretty good too, to be honest. They're not bad if they wouldn't have given up so many points in the second half of the SMU game. I mean, I wouldn't mind taking the under here with two pretty decent offenses, or defenses, I'm sorry, with their defenses. So I would either take the under 51.5, but I'm actually leaning more the positive 11.5 with Clemson. That's probably where I'm gonna go.
Gosh.
I think it comes down to what Quinn Ewers we get. I think Texas will win this football game because the defense is really good. But I mean, is Texas going to score 20 points and win? Probably. I don't know. I mean, it depends on what Quinn Ewers you get, which one shows up. And here lately, it has not been the good one. So, I mean, they scored 17 points and they beat A&M, or 20 points and beat A&M, whatever it was. So. I think Texas wins, but it's going to be a defensive game, and Texas's defense is going to win on this game.
Yeah, I think that the safest bet to take on this is probably the under 51.5. I mean,
agreed.
I'd take the under. I mean, if that continues to drop even more, I don't love it. But under 51.5, I almost like. I think that that's the way to move there. But that's not necessarily the purpose of this. Gosh, 11.5 I think is placed perfectly. I think that double digits, you're looking at a 10-point. But if I'm being honest, I think I gotta go Texas minus 11.5. I Nathan, and I hate to say it, I'm telling you right now, there's only one team left that I want to see lose, and it is the Longhorns. I don't want them to do anything beyond what they've already done. But it's hard to imagine a world where they don't go minus 11.5 on this. So now, to be saying that, I will not be betting in any favor of Texas. I will never put any type of dollar bill, not even 50 cents, on Texas to ever win a ball game. So what I will be taking is the under 51.5. But, if I had to pick one, I'll go Texas minus 11.5, whatever.
Hey, I will say, too, understand, Clemson is probably
Thanks, Darth
arguably,
Ducky.
Yeah. I was reading those too. Don't forget too that Clemson is arguably the second toughest team Texas will play all year. So this is, this is something to consider. I mean, they're not Georgia, so I still, like I said, I think Texas will beat Clemson, but I think Clemson is going to be the second toughest team they'll face this year.
100%. I mean, that's fair enough. That's fair enough, but I do think that these defenses are going to ball out. So, last one. Night game on that Saturday, December 21st, Tennessee and Ohio State. Where are we going with this?
Tennessee by a million. Tennessee by a million, brother. I mean, come on.
Tennessee's defense, if they're not the best defense in the country, they're number 2 behind Texas. I think Tennessee is going to ball the fuck
Not really by a million, but I think Tennessee is going to be able to run the ball. Ohio State. I don't know. Ohio State's in the same boat as Texas. What's your offense going to look like?
I'm going to be a degenerate on this one, and I'm taking Tennessee's money line at plus 205. I'm going to be a degenerate.
I think Tennessee wins.
I think that's super fucking inflated at positive 205. That's crazy. I think this game's going to be so close at 7-6. The seeding, I think Tennessee can win this game.
I mean, we're talking about an 8-9 matchup. I do think that obviously any team is going to have that equal rights to win it. I do think that this is a great 8-9 match, or not 8-9. Hell, what are we looking at? What is it? Oh, they are 8-9. Yeah. But man, 7.5. I think is hard to win by. I really hate taking something at 7.5. If this drops down to 6.5, then I'm really trying to stay away from that. But 7.5, I do love Tennessee to cover that. At 7.5, I don't know who I want to say wins the game. I do think that it's tough. So I'll go with the spread of 7.5 on Tennessee. If I had to pick a team that wins it, man,
Michigan was just able to run the ball on Ohio State. And I
They
think
struggled
Dylan
in.
Sampson's a lot better running back
It was
than.
bad. Tennessee's way better than Michigan. Way better.
Yeah, Tennessee has a way better run game than Michigan. So if Michigan was able to do that on that Ohio State defense,
Ohio
I
State
expect Tennessee to
struggling.
be able to run the
And
ball all over Ohio State.
we know in college football, it comes down to who's playing the best ball late. And Tennessee is playing pretty damn good ball. Ohio State is not playing good. They are cold as fuck. I'm taking Tennessee money line all day. I think they're playing some great ball right now.
I mean,
I'm not just saying they like that's the truth. They are playing good ball.
They have ever since they've lost to Georgia. They've kind of reestablished their running game and been lights out.
Although first half versus Vanderbilt, what the hell was that? Well, that's that
You
interstate
just got to
rivalry.
give them hope.
Yeah,
That's a rivalry. That's why.
Yeah, you just got to give them hope. You got to build up their confidence, then rip it away from them.
That's a rivalry. That's different.
I do agree with you,
mean,
Jay. OSU does have the best roster with 2 L's right now. 2 L's, I think, in the regular season. Because, I mean, I think we can make the argument for Texas having arguably a pretty competitive roster in that sense. And I mean, you can,
Why does Ohio State lose this game? I'll tell you why Ohio State loses this game. One, you have a Lamborghini. You have a Lamborghini, and you have a 1989 Volkswagen at quarterback. Then Ryan Day. Ryan Day is the reason that Ohio State will lose this football game. Every time he hasn't beat Michigan, he does. He looks weird. He just looks like he's out of place when he has to coach in a big game, or he makes a stupid mistake or a stupid coaching decision multiple times. And I think Ryan Day is the reason that Ohio State will lose this football game.
I will say, like, even Nick Saban said that. I mean, you could have all the 5 stars you want, but if you don't have the coach that can coach those 5 stars, you don't have shit. You know, at the end of the day, I think
that's why Nick Saban
Ryan
left.
Day's, well, after 17 years and how many national championships? But no, I think you know, to what Nathan was saying, I have to agree. I think Will Howard ain't him. I agree. I think Will Howard is kind of like
Dude, and you know what is
He
absolutely
said Ryan Day is selling weed at the barbershop. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. But
he looks high on the sideline. He doesn't know. It looks like he doesn't know what's going on.
It's crazy though that Ohio State and Texas are kind of in that same conversation. Like 2 lost teams, and their biggest downfall is in the hands of their own quarterback. Because I think that's
at least our coach is competent, though.
Yeah, I mean, he does elect to start Ewers over Manning almost every game, so no, that's to be debated. But
I'd rather have Ewers than Will Howard, though. I will.
Yeah, well, shit, dude.
Much rather take Ewers.
Okay, so this is the last thing I'll say. If you take my odds on what I've got right now built out, you can get this at plus 1173. That's the way to go.
Who'd you take for that last pick?
I took Tennessee plus 7.5 is what I did. Okay. But realistically, what I would probably do is actually do that, take off that.
Take out.
I took the SMU money line, which was kind of an unpopular take, but if you do go with the SMU money line for me, it's plus 245, which bumps us up to 2180, plus 2180 parlay odds.
Throw the Tennessee money line in there and see what it's at. Because I think Tennessee has a better chance of winning than SMU.
Plus 3723. It's not bad. Not bad. Throw a couple dollars on there.
I don't think that's an upset. I think that's what.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an upset to me.
All right. Well, that's all we got for y'all. Thank y'all, Jay and Darth Ducky, and anybody else that is still here up to this point. If y'all haven't subscribed already, please do it. We would greatly appreciate it. At least get notified when we're jumping on these live streams. It makes us feel so much better, do a much better job whenever y'all are active in the chat, joining us. Us three talk to each other all the time. So it's so much better when y'all are here, being active in the chat, giving us someone else to talk to. So anyways, thank y'all, Darth Ducky. I will see you later. Next Monday, we'll be jumping on another live stream. So go ahead and mark it in your calendars as well. We will be here talking college football, looking at some potential bets and seeing what we can do. And Darth Ducky, if I'm assuming you are an Oregon Ducks fan, seeing who your potential matchup is. Well, that's not next weekend. That'll be the following Monday after that. Anyways, though, best of luck to everyone moving forward throughout the rest of this week. See y'all another date. Later.
Later.
Ride the pond.